All right, I think we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another
Good.
Thursday question and answer session from SRUSA. This is our Inside College Soccer Live podcast. We've decided to do this every Thursday for same time, 4 o'clock on the West Coast, 7 o'clock on the East Coast, and appropriately in between. So I'm Don Williams. Today I've got Andre Luciano. Hey, Andre, how are you?
Hey, Don, how are you?
Good. And Reese Canella. What's up, Reese?
Hey, how we doing?
Good. And we've got Chris Cousins as our engineer in the background. So thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. It's midnight his time, so it's a big sacrifice for him to come to do it. Well, we're going to dive right into it with some questions. So we've got our first question coming up here, Chris. All right. First question, when coaches ask me to keep them updated, how often should I send them new highlights? I don't want to annoy them, but I don't want them to forget about me either. What do you think, Andre?
I think it's appropriate to update them every time that there's a new schedule, or if there's something positive happening in terms of soccer or academics. And as long as you, as long as you keep communicating with the coaches, then you're visible.
Right. Reese, anything to add to that?
Oh, good answer. That's pretty much what
I think we
say
can
as well.
call that a consensus.
Mhm.
All right, what do we got next? I have a D3 player who will get another year of eligibility since he came in 2020. Oh, a super senior. Okay. So he's planning to go to grad school and wants to play, but no clue what the process looks like. What does recruitment look like for experienced athletes in this scenario, Reese?
It's quite similar to how the recruiting process is before. Obviously, you're now going to have the experience. You've been away from home. You understand what it is to be a student athlete, and so it's going to be similar, but you're going to have to figure out what schools have your program. If you're going to grad school, you're probably going to be a little bit more specific in what you want to major in. And so now probably the schools that you have the choices from are probably dwindled down a little bit just because I'm assuming, going to be more specialized. But, it's going to be similar. You're going to have to reach out to coaches. Coaches are going to want to see some film. So it's going to be very similar.
Yeah. What do you think, Andre? Anything to add to that?
I think having a conversation about what you want to do in terms of grad school, what schools that you're looking at, and to also be realistic, like how can you come in and be an impact? You don't want to go into your fifth year, and being in grad school and not playing. So you got to make sure that the school that you go to, you actually have the ability to go and be an impact player, in my opinion. And I think that also communicating with your current coaches and having a discussion about, hey, what's my long-term plan, really is helpful.
Yeah, and I'd say I concur with that too. What do we got next, Chris? Is it too late for foreign 2023s? Is it too late for foreign 2023s? No, it's not too late. Male or female? So I love how everybody always leaves out the gender, and it really affects the recruiting process. So if you're a female just entering and never even thought about this before, and suddenly you've decided you want to go to college, you have less options available to you now than you did 4, 5, 6 months ago, but it's nowhere near finished at all. Boys, girls, it's all still wide open. As always, it depends on how good of a player you are, how good your grades are, what your financial budget coming into the United States is. All right, did I miss anything? I think that covers that. Does a college team with girls choosing to transfer after this season, 22, does that open slots and opportunities for uncommitted 23s, Andre?
I think it does, and I think people have to understand how the recruiting mindset of a lot of coaches is that, number one, coaches are going to try to address immediate needs in terms of their programs, based on what the season is showcasing, and so if there's some immediate needs, they're going to look to fill that. If there is if that opens up some opportunities for some players, great. But I think really, trying to find out if those teams have camps or something going on that they can get in front of those coaches and showcase themselves immediately. And just kind of give you a quick story. I mean, like I had 2 high impact transfers that came in when I was at Northern Arizona University, but those were kids that I recruited before, and so they didn't come to NAU, but they went somewhere else, and then they looked to transfer back. So I had a rapport with them. I knew who they were as players. But if you're looking to transfer into a school and they have some openings, you got to make sure that the coaches see you and they have a proper evaluation.
Yeah, so it's going to open, I think it's obvious, it's going to open up slots for more 23s that are uncommitted if you have a team with a bunch of players leaving. But I would want to know, why 9 freshmen left the team. I would want to know why before I sent my daughter or son to go play for that team. So I think that's an important question you're going to have to research. What do we got next, Chris? Long one. Rosaria Fiorentino asks, my son is a college freshman at a D2 school, which was not his choice. Because of COVID, he was not able to play and be seen, so he lost his important chance. He's a very talented player with lots of achievements, firing his soccer career. He's very dedicated and passionate and suffers to play in a team where he is the only one to actually care. He's looking to transfer and join a better level. Dedicated team, what's the process? I'd like to help him, but I don't know where to start from. Thanks for any advice. So we've got this young man. He didn't want to go to this D2 school, but because of COVID, had no other choice. It was the only opportunity available, according to mom. Nobody else on the team cares. He's the only one that's dedicated. Not sure that that's relevant. But he basically wants to transfer to a team that he considers more serious. What would you advise this mom, Reese?
Again, I think, you've got to look at academics. So, if he transfers, are the academics going to line up with what he wants? You can go to other D2 programs and you can go to their training session and play, right? So now he probably didn't do this before, but if he wants to transfer to other D2 schools, and I think NAIA allows you to do that as well, and some other divisions allow you to go. I know Division 1 and Division 3 doesn't, but they allow you to go and practice. So now you can get an idea of what the training sessions are like, and actually understand if the players are serious or not. So from a academic standpoint, does it work for you? From a athletic standpoint, can you go on campus, get a feel for what the players are like, do an overnight visit, play at one of their practices, and just understand the whole scope of what the program's about?
Anything you would add to that, Andre?
I think communication is really important with any coaches that you're working with. I mean, they took a chance that they recruited you, in a difficult situation, which was COVID. And I think having a good dialogue with the coach in terms of like, hey, what's our long-term plan here? What are we looking to do? And then having that discussion with the coach and saying, hey, maybe this isn't the right fit for me. Would you be willing to help me find something a little bit better? And or the coach maybe has a vision of saying, hey, you know what, we've got big plans. We've got some big recruiting plans going forward. You're a big part of that. So I think also give the coach an opportunity to kind of discuss, what the long-term plan. I mean, you are only in your freshman year, your first semester, and being a little bit more open-minded instead of just like pulling, the trigger quick and saying, hey, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good advice. And I always said I give that same advice to anybody that's thinking about transferring, is have an open and transparent and honest conversation with your coaches. All right, Chris, what do we got next? Another long one. Okay. So this is a group member there. So we've got, if you folks don't know, we've got a Facebook group, College Soccer Parent Recruiting Resources. And this is one of the questions they wanted to ask us anonymously, though. My senior son was, I don't know how, being recruited by several schools, mostly D3. Just finished his high school season, and although the team lost early in the playoffs, he had a fantastic season, both as a player and a leader. He's reached out to a few schools he's been talking with, and it's been radio silence from a few. Some have responded, but some haven't. We're just not quite sure why, since his performance this season was so good, although they may not know all of his stats. Club season starts in a few weeks, but he's the only senior on his club team. The rest are juniors, and I think most showcases for his team won't be till spring, and it'll be too late for him getting exposure to colleges, right? He's already submitted some of his college applications, is still finishing a few others. What should we do now? What would you say, Andre?
Well, I think first, everybody has to kind of keep things in perspective and understand that these coaches are going through their own personal seasons, and they're super busy. They're fighting for, conference playoff spots. They're trying to figure out how things are going to, work itself out for the rest of the season. Maybe they still don't know 100%, if they're going to look to recruit for a certain spot. And so I think that, people are panicking. And then the other thing too is, a lot of coaches, unless you are at a local area, they're not going to really invest the time to travel and watch you at a high school game to kind of follow up, unless they've evaluated you a couple times in club and seen you in a camp setting, and then maybe as a courtesy to come out and watch you play high school, just to kind of get a definitive yes or no, to see what your leadership's skills are like. But I think that, especially with the Division III schools, number one, they might not have the resources to go out to a high school game. Number two, they're just really involved and busy with their season. And number three, just continue communicating with them. That's the thing that I found the most, is that just sometimes coaches, I just got a text message from somebody at Division III school in Ohio, and like, hey, I'm really sorry I didn't get back to that kid. We've been traveling for the last 2 weeks. It's just been really difficult. And so a little bit of understanding in that regard. And then the other one is just continue communicating with the coach. And, and if you work with someone like us, it's really easy. We basically will call a coach and, get a text message right back saying, oh man, totally slipped. I'm sorry. Let me get back to him. And that's the advantage of having an advocate that works for you.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Reese? I think that's accurate, or Andre?
Yeah, I think the main thing for them is the exposure, and kind of what Andre just said. We're able to, in SRUSA, able to give the exposure that he may need at a point where it's going to be difficult now, because of the points that were mentioned in that question. He's playing for a team where the players are younger, and so that's going to be difficult. Not going to be playing till the spring. Coaches don't have the time, resources to go and watch games in high school, so that it's going to be a difficult situation for them. But I'll also say, look at schools that they want to go to. These coaches that they've emailed, and potentially go to their camps. They have ID camps, winter camps, and get in front of the coaches if you really want to go to those schools.
Yeah, there you go. What do we got next, Chris? Brian Mackers asks, college coaches that send out invites to come and visit and train with the team then don't reply to your emails. So it's not really a question, but Brian Mackers is clearly annoyed with college coaches that send out invites to come and visit and train with the team and don't reply to emails. Well, I appreciate your frustration, Brian.
What I will say
I'm not
to that,
sure
Don,
what we can do about that. What's that?
I would say to that, Don, is that kind of what Andre just said. Coaches are so busy, don't have the time and resources. We were all coaches, and we're going to miss an email or two. Coaches have their sessions. They have recruits on campus. They have to do fundraising. They have to, contact alumni. Typically at this time of year, alumni events are happening on campus, right? You're bringing in your alumni, bringing them into a game. There may be an anniversary. When I was at Baldwin Wallace University,
A lot of stuff to do, right?
50th
A lot
anniversary.
of stuff to do, as your point.
There's a lot. So patience. Email them again.
Yeah,
and be understanding.
I think that's as good an answer as any. And what do we got next? Kiyomi Murata asks, at official visits to mid-sized D1s, what should a player visitor wear? Well, I'm not sure that mid-sized D1, top D1, bottom D1, mid-sized D2, top T2, but I'm not sure any of it matters. What should you wear to an official visit? I don't know. I don't pay attention. I mean, what do
Be
you, is there,
appropriate.
do you know what we're talking about here, Andre?
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah,
something
I
going on
think-
out there that's a controversy?
I don't think it's a controversy. I think number one, be respectful in what you wear, you know, and you know, you can have your personality and whatever you do, but you know, be mindful that you're also, you know, representing yourself and your family and what you're wearing. So, you know, don't be inappropriate in terms of the types of shirts you're wearing or something like that. And then I think the big question is always like, you know, when they show up wearing another school's, you know, shirt.
Oh, okay. I didn't think
You
about
know,
that. I
You
didn't
know,
even think
and
about
so
that.
they
I've never
show
had that
up.
happen.
They show up with another school,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, it's a little bit of a slap in the face. You
So
know,
don't wear your Stanford Stanford shirt to the Cal Berkeley campus. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just be mindful. And I always knew at the end of a visit, if they bought a sweatshirt or a T-shirt at the bookstore, I knew that we had a good chance of landing that player.
Yes.
There you
Yeah.
All right. All right. What do we got next, Chris? Ben Patterson asks, playing time and opportunities need to be earned. So that said, if my daughter, a 2024, is fortunate enough to be recruited, at what point in the recruiting process with interested coaches is it the right time to ask her about that coach's vision for her coming into the program? So playing time as a freshman, redshirting, working her way into the pitch, etc. Well, Ben, I'll start out here by saying I've never recruited a player, recruited them, said, please come play for me with the intent for them to sit the bench. I've had players that I've agreed to allow to be on the team with the understanding that they would be redshirting because I thought the family was good and the kid was good. But and I think I'm pretty common in that. So if you're an active recruit, I think you're going to get an opportunity to compete. What do you think there, Andre?
Well, I'm going to say this, is that the number one complaint a player has at the end of their career is playing time,
Yeah.
right? I think that's, you know, like, hey, I didn't play as much as I wanted to. I think any coach that comes in and says, hey, I'm going to promise you playing time, they can't guarantee that because they just don't know. And so I would be mindful of any coach that says, hey, you know, we're gonna look to, you know, you're gonna play a lot, because they can't control that. If you show up completely unprepared, unfit, not ready to go, then if the coach doesn't play you, then you know, immediately that coach is a liar. And so I would say, you know, I think that if a coach has a discussion about redshirting, and I just recently had that. I had a player that went to a school, they talked about immediately, hey, you're gonna have to redshirt. And that player wasn't really okay with that. And so decided to commit to another school that said, hey, you know what, you're going to come in and you're going to battle and you're going to, you know, battle to compete, and the best player is going to play.
Right.
And so I think that, you know, in their mindset was like, I want to go and I want to play here for 4 years. I don't want to be here for 5. And I think that conversation, you know, I think it's a tough conversation to have without really knowing, you know, unless you know, hey, there's 3 seniors in front of you in that spot. Are you okay with that? And most coaches will probably play their upperclassmen unless the freshman is lights out better.
Right. Yeah. What do you think, Reese? So when should they ask and have that discussion with the coach, or is it appropriate? What do you think about that? Having that discussion with the coach about playing time, recruiting, or redshirting, you know, when they're going to get to play. Is the coach going to really know, Reese, before they get them in with the team? I mean, we've all recruited kids, right, Reese, that we thought were stars and they turned out to be busts. I was thinking about that the other day, my biggest busts that I've ever recruited. And then we've also had players that surprise us and shock us, and we didn't expect to see that out of, right?
Right. I think, you want to ask the question, if they've seen you play and they've seen you play maybe a couple times or seen your film, you want to ask the question, sooner than later. But just know, like Andre said, that no coach can guarantee what's going to happen, right? The level is a jump. And so, you can ask what the plan is, but know that cannot be a guarantee. That's just what the coaches envision based on what they've seen and based on what they're going to lose and based on their conference and, and their team. So you can ask, but it's not a guarantee by any means.
Yeah, no, I think that's as good as we can say. All right, what have we got next, Chris? Okay. What's the best app to make a highlight video to send to coaches? And then kind of as a follow-up, how long should it be? This is Avery Mollett. I promised you, Avery, we'd get to your question today. How long should it be and what information should we put in? So Esther asks, what's the best app to make a highlight video to send to coaches? And then Avery asks, how long should it be and what information should we put in it? Maybe I'll answer the app question first. The iMovie, you can use there's the Movie Maker. YouTube has a free editing. You just needed something so you can grab the clips out and put it in. And then what's your advice then, Andre, and how long it should be and what should be in the film?
First 20 seconds, get my attention. Throw in some great highlights. I always talk to the players, like if it's something that's just phenomenal to start off with, just kind of catches my attention. But about 3.5, 4 minutes in, I'm kind of over. I'm done. Okay, if I'm either interested or I'm not interested in that, 3.5 to 4 minutes. And so it's got to engage me for about 4 minutes, and then my thought process starts wandering somewhere else. I mean, that's just me personally. And if there is a highlight film and then another attachment of a game film, if it's really intriguing, I might scroll into the game film side of it and start watching a little bit of that.
Right. What's your preference, Reese, as a coach?
Yeah, like you said at the beginning, iMovie is quite easy and accessible for a lot of people, especially people with Apple products. And so that's an easy one in terms of the app. And then with the highlight video, I think if you aim for 5 minutes and it, average, then you're going to get some people that, do 6, 7 minutes, some people that do 3 or 4 minutes. So I recommend 5, give or take a minute. And like Andre said, you have to have highlights that straight away, you're like, oh, okay, I know what that player's about. And it has to be positional. So sometimes I have defenders who are playing the ball out from the back. And it's like, you're a defender first. So let's have some defending clips. If you're an attacking mid or a forward, let's have some clips of you scoring or assisting. But they need to get clips that the coach wants to continue watching this video.
Yeah, I think that's probably not said enough, Reese. I think that's really, really well said. Keep it positional, put your best stuff from that position up front, right at the first 30 seconds. Excellent.
And then Don, also knowing your audience, I think it's really important because college soccer is so different. If you are just showing possession, it's not really reflective of how college soccer, for the most part, is played. And so you have to be able to show some qualities about your defending, your 50-50 tackles, your aerial, battles that you're winning. And we very rarely ever see that. And I think that's the number one thing I ask kids when they work with us. Can you please add some defending, some transitional moments, whether you're going forward or you're defending and tracking back, and your ability to win 50-50 balls in the air and on tackles.
Yeah, in all positions. Good one. All right, what do we got next, Chris?
Hey,
Reese, you got a shout out. Reese Canella's tweet of the week.
I'll just jump in there, Don.
Don, go ahead. What's that?
Yeah, no, I'll just jump in there. I put this in there, so I was like, right, let's have a look throughout the social media, see what's kind of stood out a little bit. So I thought, because either like Andre, or I mean, Andre puts plenty of stuff out there. You do as well, Don. I wasn't picking like Reese, like, oh, he's my favorite or anything like that, but it's one of the things I saw straight away. I was like, oh, so
Oh,
Reese
come on,
can
Reese
kind
is your favorite. He's
yeah,
your favorite. Just admit it.
He's English as well, yeah. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
But I just thought maybe like he can add more to it than this tweet. You can bring a bit more context to it. Andre can add his piece. You can add your piece, stuff like that. So I thought
Now,
maybe
why don't you read it, Reese, since it's your tweet?
Yeah. So I got the emoji, started with the emoji, and recruits, obviously wanted to grab their attention and just said to control the controllables. Comparing yourself and your recruiting journey to others will create negative emotions like anxiety, like jealousy. And if players and your team are being recruited, then ask them how and use that to your advantage. And it actually kind of stemmed from last week, where we had a player who was asking, how do I get recruited? Everyone on my team is being recruited. How do I get recruited? And so for me, it was use that opportunity of your teammates being recruited at certain schools, congratulate them and ask them, how did that happen? I think on social media, every time I go on Twitter, every day I go on Twitter, there's a new player who's, signed for a school, for a program, and, they're getting the likes and the retweets and they're being congratulated. And if you see that every day, I'm not in the position like these young men and women where they're trying to get recruited. And so I can only imagine what that does for them, right? Each day you go on Twitter and there's a teammate or a peer or someone in your class who's committed to a school, verbal commitment, signing day is coming up. That can create a lot of negative emotions. But I think if you can control what you have to do, which is get film, right? Like we talked about, use iMovie, make sure the right highlights are in your film. Make sure you're working right on the field, working hard. You're going to your trainings and you're also putting in the extra work. You're working hard in the classroom. Everything you can control, and then use that. And that should help you to get your opportunity. Use resources like SRUSA. Do everything that you can do and don't worry about, and it's easier said than done. And even as adults, you kind of look, and that's why they've come up with the phrase keeping up with the Joneses. But use all of that to get the interest and the exposure that you need or that you would like to get, and just maintain all of that and work hard and know that it will work out.
Right. What do you want to add? Anything you want to add to that? What does that quote make you think of, or that tweet make you think of, Andre?
Social media envy. There's a lot of that going on, not just in soccer, but I think just in general. And it's a recent phenomena. And, I have discussion with families who are freaking out about, I'm seeing all these kids posting that they've committed to this school, that school, are we behind? And I kind of explained to them, like, look, you don't even know if that kid is just an invited walk-on, without a scholarship. You don't know, because the coaches can't make that release until signing date, and when there's an actual signing, where they're signing their national letter of intent, then okay, well, maybe that kid is on scholarship, maybe she's not. But I think that right now, everybody is just so focused on what everybody else is doing. Like Reese said, you got to kind of focus on your own journey. And I mean, realistically, November 9th, people's seasons aren't even over, and you haven't even had people haven't even had an opportunity to sit down and have conversations with their own players on their team,
Right.
saying, hey, this isn't going to work.
Right.
This isn't going to work. You're going into your spring of your sophomore season and you haven't played any minutes. We got to have a conversation about what you want to do next, which goes back to our first tweets, which is, hey, there's some spots that are still going to be open. Coaches are literally on the 9th of November I think that's the first week usually of conference season for everybody, the conference tournament. And so there's a lot happening that people don't even know about yet.
A great point.
So don't get too caught up with what's going on, right? And just kind of stay in your lane. I told the parent, I'm like, quit, just don't get on Twitter and get, just keep things in perspective that, it's a fluid, it's always fluid, right? That's the new word, right? That we use during COVID. It's fluid. Everything's fluid right now. So things are fluid, and a lot of kids are struggling because they're watching what everybody else is doing. And it goes with school too, right? Kids get to a school there. And I think there was a post about this, and Don, I don't know if I've got a couple seconds to kind of go through with this, but there was a post and they were talking about how even kids that are non-student athletes are struggling going to schools because everyone is posting all the great things about the schools that they're going to. And whatever situation that you're in, you're like, oh, that school seems like a better campus life. That the dorms look better over there. The meals look better over there. The pregame tailgate before the football game looks better at that school. So then everybody's like, my situation sucks. It's not good compared to what everybody else is doing. And so I think that it's a phenomenon that's going on. It's not only, related to just, recruiting, but I think just in general, everyone posts what's great about their life. No one ever posts like the reality of like, hey, this is the bus ride. It sucks.
Yeah.
No one says that. And so I think people have to kind of keep things into perspective and just kind of, put your head down, go to work, and good things will happen if you're a good player and you're going to end up where you're meant to be.
I like that. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And still saying comparison is the thief of joy. You can't enjoy the moment that you're in if you're thinking about what everybody else has and what you don't have. And Chris, you may want to speak. I want to ask you a question, Chris. I'm going to ask you to speak up real quick because I've been at this for 4 years, but you've been at this for 12 years, strictly placement. What percentage of kids would you guess get placed between January and April?
Can I share a picture? I just actually, while you were talking then, I was like, maybe I should share this image that I use in my clients. So
that'd be great.
It could be worthwhile. See if it just come over 1 second. I'll just quickly flip over 1 second. New share. Can you see that?
Yes.
Tell me.
I still see, there it is. I now see it.
Okay. Yeah. It'll take a little bit longer, Don. Being in the mountains. So yeah, this is mine. I deal with international guys, and this is not like a rule for everyone, but typically, this is what I find. So this is the year leading up to when they're due to start. So like July, for example, let's say this year. So we're in this like green bit here, and I always explain these sort of two colored sections here. I always say like the green section here is the guys who are, I don't know, coming out of professional clubs. Like coaches right now are busy during this period here because they've got the season going on. They haven't even spoke to their own players, like Andre said. But I also know that they will reach out to us on a daily, hourly basis and find out if there's any top guys available. So that's the green season. That's kind of like the national team. That's the professional players. Don't get me wrong. There's obviously high academic players and other ones as well. But as a rule of thumb, that's kind of where it's at. Majority of players, and I always try and go through like the year, like try and give them here's how a coach works. So, and correct me if I'm wrong as well, guys. But I mean, you go through the season. Let's say you finish in November. Let's say at some levels you might go into December, but you have a Christmas break. There's a lot of showcases on in December over that sort of period there. Get back in the office middle of Jan, towards the end of January. And then you kind of go, right, okay, this is what we need. This is what we've seen over this sort of period. And this is who we're going to go after. So we actually started positioning our international UK showcase at the end of January because we found that putting in this season here, there's so many showcases. I mean, you guys will all know this, like how many showcases are on during that sort of particular November, December, January period. And we just thought, well, let's take ourselves out of that. Majority of our players are not in that professional club sort of level. So let's put ourselves in a position of where the back after Christmas break, they know what's what, and then we'll do our showcase when basically they're back in the office. And yeah, they're not there in person, but you've seen the production value that we try to do with the multiple cameras, stadiums, like commentators, replays, all that sort of stuff. And we found the percentage of clients getting recruited from them particular showcases when it's positioned in the January, February, much higher than doing it in December. But take that out of it and it's talking about a normal person. We just find, and kind of to long story short of the question, we kind of find this blue sort of area here is when 95% of our UK boys, obviously it's different for girls and different for guys in the timelines, but UK boys is in this period here. And because at the end of the day, I try to explain to people that in this green period here, they got like, let's say 500 people go after the same England U17 striker. That means 499 of them are going to be let down. So they'll go to plan B, plan C, plan D, and it goes all the way. So yeah, so long and short of it all is this sort of blue area here is when I try to tell majority of our clients we'll get the offers / the commitments in that period there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that coincides with my coaching career. I don't know how that coincides. Andre, maybe yours, but I coached at D2 NAIA junior college. I didn't coach at top D1. So, and it wasn't on the girls' side. I know the girls' side's earlier, but this very much still corresponds with what we're hearing on the boys' side at all levels. Of course, my son coaches at North Carolina State, so I'm hearing what ACCs do. Plus, we've been in talks with Syracuse and other ACC, Big Ten schools. You've been talking to Indiana, as a former Indiana player and coach. And yeah, what do you think about that, Andre? What's your experience?
Well, I think on the women's side, it's definitely different.
Yeah.
It's expedited, significantly more on the women's side, especially with the Division Ones and then the Power Fives. Like I said, they're addressed a year in advance. I think on the men's side, like I'm just getting phone calls and texts from top 20 programs saying, hey, what do you have in this position for 23s? And part of it is maybe the recruits that they had did not pan out, or the recruits or the players that they have currently on the roster are thinking about entering the professional path, and they're looking to leave early. And I think that happens a lot more on the men's side and on the women's side, although I think that it's going to change at some point in time where women are going to leave a little bit earlier from college for a professional opportunity. But I think the timeline kind of works. And, and then also, Chris, is, the dead periods are so different between the men and the women. I think the dead period is still December 15th through January 5th on the women's side, right, Don, for Division One?
Yeah, something like that.
Did everybody agree? Yeah. And then on the men's side, it's like a week, right? And so the dead periods are so different, and the timelines are a little bit different. Now, everybody's got to understand too, is that why are there early commitments? Early commitments are, is a way for coaches to get kids off the market. And, I posted something, what everybody has to understand is that the whole concept of verbal commitments was to get kids off the markets before the next showcase. And so kids would, fill in their player profiles. They'd go to a tournament and it said committed. And everybody's like looking at these profiles like, oh, okay, I'm just not going to, recruit this kid any longer. She's going to be off the market now for 12 months, basically. And sports like basketball and football, they could care less. They're like, the NCAA allows us to communicate with a kid until they sign an LI. We're going to continue doing. We still have, a little bit of an agreement between all coaches that if a kid's committed, and we don't approach them. Some coaches, they could care less. They're going to go after those kids. And so I think it's different, but I think on the men's side, it's a lot slower than the women's side. And I think that the calendar that you showed, Chris, is pretty spot on.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, like I said, it's completely different for the girls. Like if I had John on here who deals with the women's in the UK, then obviously there's a completely different, like his showcase is like the 9th of December this year, just before obviously the dead period. So yeah, it's, like I said, this is just a guy's thing. And like I say, it's internal, but I thought I'd just share it.
Yeah, I like sharing internal what happens internally, a little bit of behind the scenes. We see it happen, and even on the girls' side, look, the sheer number of kids that are going Power Fives is very, very small, folk, compared to, it's less than 1% of the kids that are going into college. So pulling that out for just a moment, the other mid-level D1s and D2s and D3s, most of their rosters will be filled between January, February, and our girls are wrapped up tight by the end of March. I mean, we've got nothing left by the end of March. Where our guys, that'll go on to May and sometimes even into June.
Don, I will add just with the Power Fives and the girls. Like, for example, we have the December girls showcase every year. That's not changed. It's always been December, but that gets a ton of like big schools there. Obviously, other schools as well, but they're in the conversations right now with the girls. Like, so for example, we've got girls who play for England and Scotland, Ireland, Wales, whatever, Manchester United, Arsenal, all the usual stuff with the girls. But they're having their discussions right now, and then the showcase is kind of like the final piece. So they'll fly over for the showcase, and then they'll say, "Yes, I'll speak to that person right there." And then it's much more active at the girls' showcase than it is the guys' one, just because, like you say, girls, especially the top girls, everyone jumps on them a bit earlier than obviously the guys' sort of timeline.
Yeah, and this is a fairly new phenomenon on the girls' side of coaches going overseas and actively recruiting. That number is growing of NCAA, NAIA coaches going overseas to actively recruit is a fairly new phenomenon. I've still got college coaches calling me saying, how does this overseas recruiting work at the D1 level? They haven't got into it at all. I think it's been going on for much longer on the guys' side.
We make it a little bit easier with the new showcase like production that we put on as well. So obviously a lot of coaches can fly over with the budgets, but a lot of schools don't have the budgets to fly over. So that's definitely, I'm not just like blowing our own trumpet, but I definitely think that's helped a lot as well. We get a lot of compliments about that on the girls and guys side.
And let's put things in perspective too. Like if you think about, you say Power Five. So on the women's side, you've got the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the Pac-12, and what's the other one? Big 12, is that what I said? Or the SEC too, right? So those 5 conferences. Those conferences, for the most part, they all sponsor women's soccer, those teams, right? And so let's say there's a total of 65 teams that are competing in those conferences as Power Fives. And let's say an average is 8 kids per recruiting class. I mean, that's really 490 kids, 500 kids out of the whole country that are looking to go to Power 5 schools.
Out of the world. Out of the world.
Yeah.
Across the world, right? And you think about the different platforms in this country and how many teams there are. There's still a lot of recruiting that goes on outside of that Power 5, mold and mindset. And I think that's why, I mean, there was a story, when I first got into college coaching back in the 90s, early, mid 90s. And I remember there were 3 coaches specifically who made it a point to get the early commitment prior to July 1, because July 1 of their senior year used to be the first day, and everybody would be ramped up, ready to call these kids, and they would call on July 1, and those kids would say, sorry, I've already committed. And then everybody else is like, well, these 3 coaches are doing it, so what's everybody else doing? They're now starting to get the early commitments, and it just kind of progressed itself all the way down to 8th graders, right? Which was ridiculous, and that's why the NCAA rules changed in terms of when you can communicate with kids and when you can give signed NLIs, and we got an earlier signing period. But I think that's why everybody kind of said, what's a verbal commitment? What does a verbal commitment mean? And, a verbal commitment is just, it's your intent with the college, and it's the college's intent to recruit you and assign you. But the NCAA does not recognize the word commitment unless it's a signed national letter of intent, or you have put down a deposit and, are officially accepted into the university. And so, people have to, kind of keep that in perspective a little bit about what that means. And so when you're doing an early commitment, 16 months out, a lot can happen, right? Coaches change.
Yep.
Families' financial situations change. I mean, I did have that as a college coach too. Someone saying to me, hey, coach, I know we thought this was the situation that I was going to walk on here. My parents lost, my dad lost his job. I can't afford to go to school here. Do you have money? And I'm like, I don't. And they're like, do you mind if I look somewhere else? I'm like, go for it. It is what it is. And I think that's, it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen more. I think the early commitments and decommitments are going to happen more on both sides.
Yeah, I think I can see that. I do. What are you noticing, Reese, on that? What do you think is going to happen? Are you seeing more and more early commitments?
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of early commitments, but I was going to say, to Chris's timeline, I think right now that I think majority on the women's side, majority of the class will be done and they'll be adding to it. And for the men, a smaller portion of the class will be done, and they'll be trying to really bolster their class. So, for example, I had some coaches who are interested in some of our players, and they're like, "Hey, we'll watch them at, I know MLS Next has a showcase in December. We'll have to watch that player in December." So, they're looking at Chris's timeline. They're in season November, December, and so I think you look at that timeline, and you understand for the men, they're trying to make they've obviously looked at and identified talent, but they haven't made the full-on commitments yet, whereas on the women's side they probably would have done that, and now they're just trying to add to the class. And that goes back to our point earlier about if a 22 leaves, does that leave room for a 23? And that can happen easily, right? Like you always have players that leave, or they may not take the COVID year like we talked about. So everyone's going to be on a different timeline, and everyone's going to be on their own path, players, coaches, but this gives a good overview of kind of where coaches are at
on the guy side.
Yes.
on the
So
guy
you're
side.
talking about 1,600 women's programs, 1,300 men's programs. There's hundreds of coaches turnovers every year. And so it's very likely that unless, we're talking about a Power 5 US national team level player, that new coach coming in may not know who you are. And you have to start the recruiting process all over again with that coach, even though you've made a verbal commitment. Now you might be behind because you've been off the market for 12 months or 8 months or 6 months. So that I've seen a countless number of, I've run across athletes that have run into problems at the end of that early commitment process. They never end up getting to sign for that school. So I think that's just good food for thought. Anything else, gentlemen, that has come up this week that you can think of? If not, we can call this a wrap. We've been at it for 50 minutes.
No, I think there's a lot of showcases coming up, right? And so for those of you that are out there and you're trying to figure out what's next, I think that you've got ECNL events in Phoenix. We're going to have representatives down there in Phoenix. There's going to be Surf Cup's going to be happening during Thanksgiving. We're going to have people down there. And so I think communicating with coaches, or if you're working with us directly, letting us know what the schedules are so we can communicate with the coaches of the schools that you're interested in. I think that's extremely helpful. And in the timing of how you do it and when you communicate with those coaches, I think is really critical too, because you don't want to do it too early so that it gets lost in their inbox, and you don't want to do it too late where you're getting flooded with those coaches are getting flooded with 500 to 600 emails right before a tournament. And so your timing has to be kind of spot on. And then, if you're working with us, we can always send a quick little text like, hey, do you want to watch this kid? Or like at Surf Cup, I was basically carting coaches from field to field because there was some distance that had to be covered. But just communicate with us if you're working with us. And then also, if we get a chance to talk to you guys, great. And if not, make sure you're talking to these coaches and sending them emails, reminding them of your schedules.
All right, Reese, Andre, while I got you here real quick, how do people find you on Twitter? That's mostly where you're present. What's your Twitter handle?
I'm at LV Hoosier GK. So LV Hoosier GK. So LVHOOSIER GK.
Right on. All right, Reese, any wise departing words here?
Just going back to my tweet of the week, control the controllable. Get your film, work hard on the field. There it is, look at that. Nutrition, make sure that you're getting your sleep. You've got to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to give yourself the best opportunity. So for me, that would be my parting words. You see my Twitter there, Coach Canella17. And yeah, we're active on there. We're talking to players, talking to coaches, and celebrating the success of our players that, you know, who are in season right now. They're in the midst of it. They're fighting for conference berths and trying to, you know, make the NCAA. So, you know, I think you see a lot of that on our social media, which is good to see. That's the fun part of this job, is once we've placed them, getting to follow our players and seeing how they do.
Yeah, well, with that, I think we'll say goodbye to everybody. So I'm Don Williams for Andre Luciano, Reese Canella, and Chris Cousins, saying goodbye. Have a great week, and we'll see you right back here next week with more answers to your college soccer questions.